Besides our main topic tonight, what is happening in the world of education right now? Well, in Texas, 6th grade students are learning about gay bars and HIV in a bizarre school assignment. 6th grade students in a Texas middle school were sent home with a strange questionnaire which asked them to rank their, quote, level of comfort in different scenarios. The assignment's list of 41 scenarios asked students to rank how comfortable they are with things like a friend invites you to a gay bar and your sister invites her new female-to-male transsexual boyfriend to dinner. We're talking about 6th graders here. So I don't know. 6th graders, I don't know how often they get out to the bar and everything and run into this type of stuff, or, on that rare occasion that cis gendered person in 6th grade gets to a gay bar just to check it out. But, they need to have these types of questions in our public schools, obviously. The teacher who gave out the inappropriate 41 question assignment has been disciplined, according to the Birdville Independent School District. Students were asked to rank how comfortable they were on a scale of 1 to 4 in these types of scenarios. Number 1, your dentist is HIV positive. A friend invites you to a gay bar. Your sister invites her boyfriend home to dinner, and he is a female to male transsexual. So in regards to this, a middle school teacher in Florida was also fired back in last year in 2017 for presenting the same questionnaire to students there. It's too bad this teacher herself or himself didn't do a little bit more research on the assignment and look at what had happened in the past. But this is just another example of how things can go off the deep end when it comes to public education. We live in a time right now where teachers have a handicapped ability where the state standardized tests and all the stuff that's federally mandated by the federal government has chewed down on their time to actually teach creatively. And it puts me into a tough spot. I love teachers. I think they do a great job. That's part of the reason why I got into the school board, was to protect them and the students and the community and just make sure everything was working in harmony, really. But when you see cases like this, I had great teachers that went off on tangents that made our classes interesting and made them memorable and made it so that when we thought about the lesson that we thought about these side stories, where the teacher was acting out something from the history lesson or got us involved in a Jeopardy game for the whole class and everything. So I get a little frustrated when so many federal mandates come down the pipe and it takes away from that creative time for the teacher to actually teach that. But in the case like this, if this is what's going to be considered creative, you're working against my argument here. Now I kind of want the other stuff to take up time so that you're left with not being able to do this crazy crap to our students. I mean, what is going on with this? It doesn't make any sense. But, ask your local 6th grader when you see him out at the gay bar, I guess. And another news story is seeing a high school banning the national anthem at rallies because it's outdated and racially insensitive. So a Ramon, California high school has banned the singing of the Star-Spangled Banner at rallies over its allegedly racist and offensive third verse. Let me repeat that. A Ramon, California ends there. It's a California school. You shouldn't be surprised from the rest of the story right there. Right off the bat, we're heading into California territory. If it's California, New York, or New Jersey, you know you're in trouble with it already. The national anthem will no longer be sung during California high schools' rallies as a result of the school's associated student body decision to have the song omitted from the school's rally tradition. After learning about the third verse, the other ASB officers and I thought it was completely unacceptable and must be removed from the rally, wrote the student body president. And I'm going to be honest with you. I took her name out of this whole news article in my presentation to you because, I'll be honest with you, beyond the fact that that these students are acting in an asinine way over this being offensive, the fact is, there's a part of this where she is yearning for the attention for her name to be out there as a hero to the social justice warrior crowd. And I refuse to play into that. So she is the student body president, and I'm going to leave it at that. The third verse of the Star-Spangled Banner reads, "No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave." So student body presidents also said, "We understand that this third verse is not included when the anthem is performed. But still, what does this tell us? This verse translated finds joy in the killing of African Americans." No, I disagree. To think that our nation's anthem once had the word slave and land of the free in the same sentence leaves me speechless. Maybe it's her school system that's failing her right now, and that she needs to learn a little bit more about history. So the California high school senior Dennis Florentinos spoke with Todd Starnes' radio show on Tuesday and said that there had been, quote, "a lot of pushback on the removal of the anthem," noting that the criticisms didn't come from only conservative students. Probably because there was a good amount of people on both sides that realized how ridiculous our culture is getting for being offended at everything. So, if we tie things across the pond and here as well, things aren't getting much better in public education either. There's a growing movement to ban best friends. To ban best friends in schools in America and Europe. The movement gained international attention when Prince William and Kate Middleton enrolled their son Prince George in Thomas Battersea Prep School in South London last year. News reports on the school indicated that the school encouraged students to, quote, "be kind to all their peers." Good idea so far. Which include discouraging students from having a, quote, "best friend," in favor of being equal friends with everyone at school. Okay, your whole thing just fell apart here. So we have to talk about basic psychology here for a second. You can talk to kids about trying to push away from the idea of having a best friend, but that's not how the human brain works. We are naturally attracted to certain people, naturally attracted to, in most cases, the opposite sex, people that we're sexually attracted to. I'll just leave it at that. We're naturally attracted to people of similar interests. And because of the way that they act in response to us, sometimes you end up having more time with that person, and that becomes your best friend. There's very little control over that. You can't just start hanging out with a person and go, "Ugh, would you look at the time? I gotta go over there with the other person who I have some stuff in common with, just to balance the scales a little bit here, because I don't want to get the public opinion here that we're best friends or anything, because that's illegal. That's banned now." It just gets to be so ridiculous the way that these people think. In the process, if you're paying attention to anything that's going on, the process to promote equality and tolerance, the left has lost their ever-loving mind and gone in completely the opposite direction, and has created an even deeper divide among people. That's just a deepening chasm of divisiveness between people. You can't do anything anymore. In the pursuit of these types of things, they have made things worse for people. So anyway, although Prince George's school only discourages students from having best friends, and the New York Times reports that some schools are considering banning best friends with the enthusiastic support of education experts, which shows you there's not too much going on with the cohesion of those two words right there, educational experts. Clinical psychologist Dr. Barbara Greenberg told WCBS that the idea is catching on in schools. According to Greenberg, there has been a movement in some American schools and European schools to ban the phrase best friend. The idea of banning the phrase best friends is a very intriguing social experiment. Let me stop you again right there. Kids, not my kids, because we homeschool. Kids are not going to school to be social experiments. That is where things are going off the rails today. Okay? Kids are going to learn these subjects and go on so that they could be educated adults and function in society. This is not a time to be switching things up with things like this and having social experiments, things like Common Core. Hey, let's switch up the way everybody does math and throw in some convoluted system where teachers and parents actually have to take classes to learn the Common Core method so that they can actually talk to their own children about how to do their homework. There's something wrong there. The fact that we have gone from a society where in the early 1900s, third graders were given a civil test and were able to pass it, that same civil test now given to adults who are educated can't pass, shows you the degradation of our educational system so far and what it's come to. We are lagging behind other countries, and we keep on trying these social experiments to get things back in line and get us to the back of the top of the chart again. But it's obviously not working. We keep on slipping, and the more liberal we get with things, the worse things are getting. I mean, at what point do we look at the situations and see the things that have unfolded over the years and say, you know what, things were better back at this time. This was a great time for America at this point in time because grades were great, college acceptance rates were incredible, and things were great. Well, we look back, God isn't allowed to be in school anymore. Everything is offensive. You have all these educational standards coming down from a Department of Education full of bureaucrats and not actual educational experts. And the loss of control from the actual local public school boards that then is delegated to the state and federal government under the guise of actually blackmailing these schools into doing certain things under the threat of actually losing funding for the education of that school. We've gone so far off the deep end in pursuit of trying to socially experiment and manipulate our society into this way of thinking, which most would recognize as indoctrination, really, that it's made things worse, and they refuse to see it, and instead they try to come up with even deeper ways of doing it, and it just continues to make things worse. All I can say is thank God we homeschool. I didn't know many homeschoolers growing up, and I am shocked as an adult because of how far our public education has gone off the deep end with things like this crap that we're talking about right here. How many of my personal friends and people we know that are homeschooling now, because you, as a parent, you're just backed into a corner. And unfortunately, we still have to continue to pay property taxes, which goes towards public education, paying for these other kids to be cruelly indoctrinated with nonsense that isn't even going to work for them anyway. I know a couple college professors who teach English classes for college students, and they say consistently across the board, even in higher up colleges up in the Northeast, and I'll leave it at that, where students read and write at a middle school level. How did they get into these colleges? Because the standard bar for everything has come down, because we have dumbed everything down as a society to allow people to pass things so that they aren't upset, so we don't bruise the egos of these children or their parents who become helicopter parents. It's so ridiculous, it's unbelievable. So, coming back in here, clinical psychologist Dr. Barbara Greenberg told WCBS the idea is catching on in schools. According to Greenberg, there has been a movement in America's schools and European schools to ban the phrase best friend. And the idea of the phrase best friends is a very intriguing social experiment, as we were talking about before. She said, "I see kids come in all week long who are feeling dreadful because they are excluded and because they are either nobody's best friend or their best friend has moved on. Let's face it, you can't ban somebody from having a close relationship, and you can't really ban somebody from having a best friend, but what the schools are trying to do is foster the idea of kids having more than a single friend." So, if you have children who are feeling excluded, who feel like they don't have a best friend or feel like their best friend has moved on, at this point, we're now talking about a confidence issue, okay? You can't control the actions of others, but you can control the actions of yourself. We do have a confidence problem, okay? And it actually goes both ways. When I was on the school board, we were looking at comparing the Chinese culture to American culture and how those schools reflect on their students and the student bodies within them. And we actually did a program where we exchanged assistant superintendents, because their assistant superintendent came over from China to look at our students and how we learn, and then ours went over there. And the problem that we're facing as a country, and their country as well, is that American students have an overblown sense of confidence that they can do anything and be anything because that's what they were told their whole life. Yet, as we mentioned, the grades and educational standards and everything else are always falling and on the decline. The exact opposite of the situation is happening over in China, where the students are excelling in all their studies, and the kids, like, it's almost mechanical the way that they learn, to the point where there are videos of students who felt so stressed out over a test that they get up from their desk, walk over to the window, and jump out of the high rise to their deaths because they weren't going to be able to pass the test. That's how stringent and how absolutely laser focused they are on education over there. But the problem that they have over in China is that the students lack confidence in almost every sense of the word, okay? So the social experiment, I guess you could say, of having an exchange program for our superintendents was to find out how we can increase the test scores and put more of a focus on education. And they came over to find out, how can we get the confidence of these American kids who are growing up and believing that they could be anything, even if they don't have the grades to actually achieve such a thing. Pretty interesting. The British school movement to ban best friends has been gaining momentum for years, and it now appears to be catching on in the United States, according to Greenberg.